Well, and a gracious hello to you wherever you happen to be on our planet today. I am your host, Michael Hingson, and you are listening to Unstoppable Mindset, where inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected meet. And we sort of get to tie several of those together today because my guest, Laura Bratton, happens to be blind. So that brings inclusion into it. And we could talk about diversity all day. The experts really tend to make that a challenge, but we can talk about it ourselves. But Laura is blind, and she's going to tell us about that. And I don't know what else, because that's the unexpected part of this. But we're going to have ourselves a lot of fun for the next hour. She knows that the only rule of the podcast is you got to have fun. And you can't do better than that. So, Laura, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. We're glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm excited.
Well, this will be some fun, I'm sure, which is, of course, what it's all about. Well, why don't we start by you telling us kind of about the early Laura growing up and all that, and anything about that that you think we ought to know that'll help us as we go forward?
So the early Laura was...
that was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. But yeah,
was fearless, was involved in so many different activities, and I didn't have any health concerns or vision problems. And then around the age of 9, after the summer, after my second grade school year, my parents started noticing she's just holding books a little bit closer. She's just sitting a little bit closer to the TV than normal, than usually. So they decided we'll just make a regular pediatric ophthalmology appointment, take her to the doctor, get the doctor to check her out. If you need glasses, that's fine. And we'll just move on with our summer and prepare for a new school year. So that June, when I had that doctor's appointment, my eyes were dilated. I'd read the letters on the chart in the room. The doctors had looked at my eyes. And then the doctor just rolled back in his chair and looked at my mom and said, there's a major problem going on, and we need to address this. And I'm going to send you to a retina specialist. There's something major going on with her retinas. So from that appointment, that started the rest of the summer and into the fall of just having different doctor's appointments, meeting with specialists, trying to figure out why this 9, 10-year-old was all of a sudden having vision problems. So
yeah, go ahead.
So that started the whole vision loss journey.
And what was the diagnosis that they finally came up with?
So they finally came up with the diagnosis of rare retinal onset disease. So it's not genetic. It wasn't like another accident, physical accident that caused the blindness. It's most similar to macular. So what I was losing first was my central vision. I still had all my peripheral vision. So it's very similar to macular, but not quite macular or Stargardt's, what happens in children. Mm-hmm. So that's the diagnosis of just rare retinal disease.
Interesting. And they didn't have any idea that what caused it. Do they have any better idea today? Or is it just so rare that they don't tend to pay a whole lot of attention to it?
Great question. Yes and yes. So I've done a lot of genetic testing over the years, and the gene has not been discovered that is obviously what they are predicting is that there had to be some kind of gene mutation, but that gene hasn't been discovered. So far, the genes that are identified with vision problems, those have not been the problem for me so far. So the gene hasn't been discovered. So testing continues, but not exactly sure yet.
Yeah. So do you have any eyesight left, or is it all gone?
I don't. So to continue kind of that process of the early childhood. So I was diagnosed around 9, but I didn't lose any major vision until I was in middle school. So the end of middle school is when I started to lose a significant part of sight. So I went very quickly from regular print, large print to Braille. And that was a very quick transition. So basically it was normal print to learning Braille and using Braille and textbooks in Braille and audiobooks and all that. Then through high school, I lost a significant amount of vision. So what I have currently is just very limited light perception.
Mm-hmm.
No, what I consider no usable vision, just light perception.
So you learned Braille. So you learned Braille in middle school then?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
What did you think about that? Because that was certainly a life change for you. How did you deal with all of that?
How did I deal with the process of learning Braille or the emotional process?
Both. They're kind of related, so both.
They're very much related. So learning Braille was incredibly difficult because I was trying to learn it at the same time, use it with textbooks in middle school level material rather than normal development of you learn Braille and then start out, with simple books and slowly move up. I had to make that adjustment from learning Braille and then algebra in Braille or Spanish in Braille. So using the Braille was very difficult, but because I was forced to learn it because I had to just to stay in school. You didn't really have a choice. As far as the emotional perspective, my first thought was just the denial. Oh, it's not that bad. Oh, it won't be forever. Oh, it's not going to get much worse than this. Just that denial of the reality. And then I can say more if it just kind of how that whole process unfolded. If that's kind of the whole emotional process.
It certainly was a major change for you.
Yes.
But it sounds like by the time all was said and done, and you did have to immerse yourself, like in learning Braille and so on. So it was an immersive kind of thing.
True.
You did come through it, and you seem to be functioning pretty well today, I would gather.
Yes, because of focusing on the emotional mindset piece. So once that I began to move out of denial, it was that, okay, well, I can't. This is just too hard. And then what I eventually realized and accepted was, yes, it's hard and I can move forward. So just a practical example is what you were saying about having to be fully immersed in the Braille. Yes, it's really hard to jump from learning Braille to knowing Braille and algebra, but also I choose to move forward. As you said, I choose to immerse myself in this so that I can continue life.
Yeah. And you have done it. Well, how do you view blindness today?
That is a great question. So today is the balance of acknowledging, yes, there are difficult moments. Yes, there are stressful moments. And I have the resources to process that. So now rather than just being in denial or being stuck in that, I can't do this, I can say, okay, yes, this is hard. Yes, I am frustrated. Yes, I am overwhelmed in this moment. But also, I can move forward with the gifts and purposes that I have in this world and using that as a strength. So for me, it's that acknowledging the reality, but also moving forward with that belief in myself, trust in myself.
So how long did you, at the beginning, really grieve and view all this in a negative way? Because it sounds like you've evolved from that today.
Absolutely. So in my experience, so I'm going to break the grief and the negative apart because for me, it was two different experiences. So for me, in those middle school, high school days, it was more the negative, and the grief just came along with that. now, even, through college and even now, yes, there are moments that I grieve, but that negativity has turned into the mindset of strength, the mindset of trust, the mindset of, okay, I can continue forward, again, living out those purposes, my purpose with those gifts as a source of strength, as a source of courage, it's a source of just belief in myself. So my experience now is the mindset of holding both intention, holding space for both. When I have those moments that I need to grieve, absolutely giving myself those space. And at the same time, choosing to move forward with that courage rather than being stuck in what I was in middle school of that negativity. Does that make sense of what I'm trying to separate the two?
Well, yeah, they overlap, but I understand what you're saying. Where and how were your parents in all of this?
So that was the incredible gift. That was a deep source of strength that as that middle school child who was in that negative place of denial and I can't, that was the source of strength. So immediately when I was diagnosed, even though I didn't have major vision loss, I was diagnosed in elementary school. They wanted to send me to the school for the deaf and blind. And so my parents had to fight to keep me in regular school. Again, I wasn't experiencing major vision loss, but just having minor vision loss. The school said, okay, you're out of public school and going to a different school. So my parents were a source of strength because they acknowledged what was happening and what was going to happen, but also held me to the same standards.
And there are some schools, I don't know how much today, but in the past, there were some schools for the blind, and I'm not sure about schools for the deaf and blind, but we'll put them in the same category. But there were some schools that really did have very high standards, and did do a great job. The Perkins School was one. Tom Sullivan, the actor, went through Perkins, and I know other people who did. But in general, the standards weren't the same, and I had the same issue.
Correct.
I remember my parents. We were in the office of the school principal of Yucca School, where I went kindergarten through third grade here in California.
Okay.
And I remember a shouting match between my father and my mother on one side and Mr. Thompson, the principal, on the other. And by the time all was said and done, he decided that he was going to acquiesce because they were not going to let me go to the school for the blind, which would have been like 400 miles away.
Okay.
So
you can relate to that experience.
I can absolutely relate to that experience. And I think that it's for kids, one of the most important things to hope comes along, that parents deal with blindness in a positive way.
Yes.
And don't view it as something that's going to hold you back.
100%.
Yeah, because if they do, then that creates a much more difficult situation.
Yes.
So it's great that you had some parents who really stood up for you and helped as you went forward.
Yes. And I was also deeply grateful that they held those standards at school, and they also held those standards at home. So they didn't just say, oh, our expectations are lower for you at home. You don't have any more chores. You just kind of do whatever you want, get away with it, whatever you want. They kept those same standards. I still had chores. We just made, the accommodations are adapted if we needed to adapt anything.
Yeah.
A story that I always remember, just like you talking about, you vividly remember being in that principal's office. I remember one day the specific chore was unloading the dishwasher. And I remember thinking, well, I don't really want to unload the dishwasher today. So I just kind of thought, the blindness will get me out of the situation. So I was like, Mom, I can't unload the dishwasher. I can't see exactly where to put all the silverware in the silverware drawer. And I can still see this in my mind's eye. She was standing in the doorway of the kitchen in the hallway, and she just turned around and just said, Laura, unload the dishwasher, put the silverware in the drawer, and just walked away. And that told me she was still holding me to the exact standards. She wasn't saying, oh, honey, that's okay because of your blindness.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it. That was such a huge teaching moment for me because it taught me I can't use my blindness as an excuse. That was an incredible experience that I always think back on and remember.
Yeah. And I remember growing up, there were chores I did, there were chores my brother did, and there were things that we had to do. But we had, and my brother was sighted, 2 years older than I, but we had very supportive parents for both of us. And one of the things that the doctors told my parents when they discovered that I was blind was that I was going to take all the love that the family had, even for my older sibling.
Oh,
and my parents said that is just not so. And they worked really hard to make sure that my brother got all the things that he needed and all the support that he needed.
As well. Wow.
When he was still in high school, I remember they got him a car. And I don't remember when he got it. Maybe, I don't know whether he was already a senior in high school, but he got a car. And you know, I didn't want a car. I didn't want that, but you know, that was okay. I would have driven it around if I got one, but you know, that's okay. But parents are such an important part of the process.
Yes.
And they have to be ready to take the leap.
Yes.
That blindness isn't the problem. It's attitudes that tend to really be the problem.
Right. 100%. And thankfully I had that experience. Another example that I always think of all the time, that's still such a vivid memory, is as a family, we're a big sports family and love to go to different sporting events. And so we would always go to high school and college football games. And as I was in those middle school, high school years, those first early days of experiencing difficult vision loss, where obviously I'm sitting in the stands and can't see the field clearly, rather than my parents saying, oh, you're just going to stay home. Oh, you're not going with us to be part of this. My dad, I really literally remember my dad saying, here's a radio. I just put new batteries in. Let's go. So I would just sit there with my family listening to the game on the radio. And that was such a gift because, again, they didn't say, is what you're saying about the leap. They didn't say, okay, you can't do this anymore. They just figured out a way to adapt so that I was still part.
Yeah. I've been to a number of baseball games and the same thing. I've been to a high school football game, but I've never been to a pro football game, and I've never been to a basketball game. And while I think it would have been fun, I'm a little bit spoiled, and I think that the announcers today aren't as good as the announcers that we used to have, like Dick Enberg doing sports out here, who did football, Chick Hearn, who did basketball, who could talk as fast as
fast.
I mean, he taught me how to listen fast. So
that's great.
He talked as fast as many times books I read talk.
Perfect.
He was just incredible, but that's okay. But still, I've been to games, and it is a lot of fun to be able to go and listen. It's, even if you're listening on the radio, the point of being at the game is just the sounds and the experience of being at the game and hearing and interacting with all the sounds, because you're not hearing that as much through the radio as you are listening to the fans as they yell or as the foul ball's coming at you, you know.
Yes, 100%. And just to feel the energy, you know, when your team's doing well and your team's not doing well, just to feel that energy, and then just also to be there and have that fun experience with your family or friends or, you know, whoever you're with. That is such a fun experience. So, yes.
So when you went into high school, what did you study or what did you do there? What were your interests?
So in college,
Well, I was thinking high school, but you can do college.
so high school, honestly, I didn't have specific professional interests because it was just so much focused on the blind surviving and all the surviving just the new blind, because the blindness was literally happening during high school.
Right.
So my only focus was just survival, passing, because it was all of my energy was focused on the learning Braille and just completing the assignments. Fast forward to college, my focus was definitely, my major was psychology. My focus was on psychology a lot because of my personal experience, because of that experience in high school. And just that not only that desire from my personal experience, but just using that experience to then help and support others from the mindset of again moving through that negativity to that foundation of grit. So it was definitely focused on psychology to be able to support others from a mindset perspective.
So how did you bring that into play in college?
So that was my focus. My major was psychology, and then I spent those years in college figuring out specifically what area of psychology I wanted to focus on, what facet of psychology I wanted my focus to be. So that was the purpose of the psychology, and taking different classes within psychology to try to figure out where are my strengths within that major.
And what did you discover?
So what I discovered was I wanted the psychology the mindset to support people with, to be that holistic perspective of, yes, the psychology, but also the spiritual connection and just our physical well-being all connected together. So supporting our healthy mindsets and emotional health was not just psychology. It was the psychology, physical, taking care of ourselves, and the spiritual, taking care of ourselves, all connected, combined together. So that's what led me to doing a Master of Divinity, to be able to focus on and learn the spiritual part of the mindset.
So what part of psychology did you eventually settle on?
The holistic approach. So rather than just focus on specifically the mindset, focusing on us as a whole being, as supporting us through that mental, physical, spiritual connection, that the healing, the empowerment came through all of that. So in that master's, what I focused on specifically was chaplaincy. So supporting people, specifically, I was a hospital chaplain. So focusing on helping people within the hospital setting when they're there for different physical reasons, being able to be that spiritual presence, focusing on both the spiritual and the emotional.
And where did you do your undergraduate study?
So I did my undergrad at Arizona State, and I was going to say a large reason, but not just a large reason, pretty much the whole reason I chose ASU was for their disability resources. So a major focus that they emphasize is their disability resources is not a separate part of the university, but it's completely integrated into the university. So what I mean by that, example of that is, being a psychology major, I still had all the same classes. I was still in all the same classes as all the other psychology students on campus. I just had the accommodations that I needed. So that would be double time on testing, or note takers if I needed note takers in a class. So they did an incredible job. Like they had a whole Braille lab that would print Braille books and provide books in PDF format. So the accommodations that I needed as a person who was blind were integrated into the whole college experience. So that was incredibly powerful for me as a person who had just become blind and didn't know what resources were available.
Did you have any major challenges and major issues in terms of dealing with blindness and so on while you're at ASU?
Not at all. I am so grateful for that because I wasn't the only person on campus who was blind. I wasn't the first blind person. I certainly wasn't the last. So because they had so much experience, it was an incredible, again, empowerment for me, because on the emotional perspective, it taught me and literally practically showed me, yes, I can be a person with a disability and be integrated into the world, because they showed me the resources that were available. So I was deeply, deeply grateful for what they taught me.
Now, where did you grow up?
So I grew up in South Carolina.
So that is, and that's why I wanted to ask that, because we hadn't mentioned that you were from South Carolina before. But that was a major undertaking then to go all the way across country to go to ASU.
Yes.
On the other hand, they do have a pretty good football team. Just saying.
Right.
Now, I went to University of California, Irvine. I don't even know. I'm sure they must have some sort of a football team today, but they do have a pretty good basketball team. And I haven't heard whether they won the Big West, but
Conference.
I haven't heard that they did. So I'm afraid that that they may not have, and so they may not be going to March Madness. Yeah,
right.
But whatever.
They've been choose another team for March Madness. Spell your bracket in a different way.
Well, they've been in the big dance before. They got to the Sweet 16 once, which was pretty cool.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
That's really cool.
What did your parents think of you going across country?
Again, just like you talked about your parents taking that leap, they were incredibly supportive because they knew ASU would provide the resources that I needed. Because again, in those years, as I'm losing a major part of my sight, we didn't know other people who were blind. We didn't know what resources were available. Mm-hmm. Obviously, my parents reached out to people around us, to connect with people who were blind, to learn about that. But we didn't have a lot of experience with that. So what we knew and what my parents were excited about was ASU would be a place that I could not only have that college experience, but be taught the resources. And one of the major resources was my disability coordinator. So my disability coordinator, who was in charge of creating all my accommodations, she was also blind. And that was such a healing experience for me because she became a mentor. She was blind since birth. And so obviously we had different experiences where I was just newly blind. She had been blind, but still she was an incredibly powerful resource and mentor of just telling me, teaching me, not just telling me through her words, but living through her actions. You still have a full life. Like you're still a full human. Like this life still goes on. So she just modeled that in the way that she lived. So I'm so grateful for her mentorship because she was very real. She didn't minimize blindness, but also she told me and taught me and showed me there's still a full, great life ahead.
Mm-hmm. Which is really what all of us are trying to get the world to understand. Blindness isn't the end of the world. It's not the problem.
Exactly. She literally modeled that.
Yeah. which was pretty cool. Well, then where did you
Yes.
go to get your Master's of Divinity?
So then I went to get my master's at Princeton Theological Seminary, and that was a completely different experience because where ASU was completely set up for people with disabilities, in the master's program, they had not had someone come through their program who was blind. So in that experience, I had to advocate and be very, very clear on what my needs were, meaning what the accommodations were that I needed, and then advocate that to the administration, which that was a gift because ASU had given me the foundation of knowing what I needed, what the accommodations were that available. And then Princeton gave me the opportunity to become my own advocate, to force me to speak up and say, these are my needs and these are accommodations I have. And with these accommodations, I can be an equal student. So I'm not asking, hey, give me good grades because I'm blind, but make the accommodations so that I have my books in PDF. So I have double time on the test. So that was just as healing and just as powerful because it gave me the opportunity to advocate and become clear on my needs so that I could communicate those needs.
So this was part of Princeton in New Jersey?
Yes.
So you were in Jersey for a while, huh?
Yes. I went from sunny weather to snowy weather.
Well, you had some of that in South Carolina too, though.
Yes, true. But from undergrad, it was quite the change.
But the real question is, when you were in New Jersey, did you get to meet any members of the family? You know what I'm saying? No. The mob. Oh, yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Bada bing, bada boom. Come on now.
Definitely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of local restaurants. And
Oh, yes. When we were building our home in New Jersey, my wife was in a wheelchair her whole life. And we decided that when we went to New Jersey, because I was going to be working in the city, New York, we wanted to build a house because it's cheaper to build an accessible home for somebody in a wheelchair, my wife, than it is to buy a house and modify it. So we wanted to build, and it turns out that the person who financed the building, we got a mortgage and all that without any difficulty, but we had to get somebody to build the house. And the realtors had people they worked with. The financier part of that was from a guy, well, let's just say his main business was he was in the garbage business, and his last name was Pinto. So, let's just say we know where he got his money,
Yes. I had several of those experiences too. Yeah. The garbage business seems to be big in Jersey.
It is big in Jersey. But yes, but they were all very nice to us.
Good.
And so it really worked out well.
It all worked out.
It did. It all worked out. We had a wonderful home. The only difference between our house and the others around us is we had to include an elevator in the house.
Okay.
Because we couldn't have a ranch style home. There wasn't room. And so we had to have, and all the other homes in the development were 2-story homes.
Okay.
So we had to have an elevator. So that was essentially about a $15,000 uplift over what the house would have cost otherwise. But again, you build it in, so it's not that huge of a deal.
Right. That's perfect. So all your neighbors are jealous.
Well, they didn't come and ride it much, so that's okay.
They didn't ask for
their bigger challenges were who's giving the biggest party at Christmas or Halloween. So we didn't participate in that, so we weren't a problem.
That's great.
Yeah. So you've talked about grit a couple times. So tell me about grit, because clearly that's important to you.
Yeah. So it's so important to me because that was a main source of empowerment. So just as I talked about that negativity in the middle school, high school, what grit helped me to do is take the overwhelming future that I was so fearful. I was extremely anxious as I looked at the whole picture, everything ahead of me. So the grit came in and taught me grit is taking it day by day, moment by moment, step by step. So rather than looking at the whole picture and getting overwhelmed, the power of grit taught me all I need to do is trust myself for this next hour. All I need to do is trust in the support that my parents are giving me this next day. So breaking it down into manageable goals was the strength of the grit. So to break it down rather than the whole future.
I didn't ask you, did you have any siblings? Do you have any siblings?
Yes. So I have one older brother.
Okay. So how was he with you, being that you were blind? Was he a good, older, protective brother who never let anybody near his sister?
He was a good, older, protective brother in that he did exactly what my parents did in not having different expectations.
Yeah.
He's 5 years older. So when I'm 14, losing a significant amount of vision, or 15, losing a significant amount of vision, he, was 19, 20, doing great in college. So a perfect example of this connects with the grit. He taught me, and again, not so much in words, but again in those actions of, we will figure this out. We don't know the resources that are available. We don't know exactly what the future looks like, but we as a family will figure this out. Me as your older brother, our parents being our parents, we will figure it out day by day, step by step. And I remember a lot of people would ask my parents, what's our future? And they'd even ask my brother, what's her future? What's she going to do? And they would honestly answer, we don't know, but as a family, we'll figure it out and we'll provide the strength that she needs. And that's what I mean by the grit. So it wasn't, this is her future, and they just, named it, she'll be at home with us, right? But it was, I don't know, but day by day, we'll have the grit to figure it out. So I'm glad you asked about my siblings, because that's a perfect example of how that grit came into play and was such a powerful source of strength.
So what did you do after you got your master's degree?
So after I got my master's degree, I then did a residency, just like I was talking about the chaplaincy. I did a residency specifically in chaplaincy to complete that process of being a chaplain. So in that was a year-long process. And in that process, that was an incredible experience, because again, it taught me you are a complete human with gifts and talents. You just happen to be blind and need specific accommodations because of the blindness. So what I mean by that is, just as ASU gave me the resources regarding blindness, and just as Princeton gave me the gift to advocate for those resources, the experience in the chaplaincy taught me, when I walked into a hospital room and introduced myself as the chaplain on the unit, the patient didn't know or didn't care how long I had been blind, or how did I make it on the unit, or how did I know they wanted a chaplain. They didn't care. They were just thankful and glad that I was there to serve them and be in that chaplain role. So that's why it was empowering and healing to me, because it taught me not to focus so much on the blindness, but to view myself as that whole person, especially in that professional experience. So I can give endless examples of specifically how just the patient reaction taught me so much.
Where did you do your chaplaincy?
I did it at the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio.
Oh, my goodness. You did move around. Now, what got you there? Speaking of snow in the winter.
Yeah, literally. Yes, I can talk about that. a lot of experiences there with snow. Lake effect snow is real.
Yeah.
So they were very strong in their chaplaincy program and developing chaplains, and also their chaplaincy training was the focus that I wanted, that holistic mind, body, spirit. It wasn't just spiritual, or it wasn't just psychological. It was the holistic experience of a whole person. Mm-hmm. So wanting that to be my focus moving forward, that's where I chose to go, to be able to focus on that. So again, it was such an incredible source of healing through those patient interactions.
Well, one of the things that is clear about you is you're not bitter about any of the things that have happened, and that in reality, you are a person who appreciates and understands the concept of gratitude.
Yes. Yes. And specifically, let me go back to those high school days, and then I'll come back to the chaplain days. The way that the gratitude, my focus started, was not because I wanted gratitude, not because I chose to wake up one day and say, oh, I'm so grateful for this blindness, but it all came through a mentor who said to me in those high school days, Laura, I want you to start writing down 3 things that you are grateful for each day. And every day, I want you to write down 3 things that you're grateful for. So in my mind, my immediate reaction as a teenager, high schooler, was, that's not a good advice. I'm not sure you're a good mentor. I'm experiencing a major change in life, permanent life event. I don't know that there's a lot to be grateful for. So in my stubbornness, I said, okay, I'm going to prove her wrong. So I started to think of the 3 things each day I was grateful for. And over the weeks that I did this, I then realized what she was teaching me. She was showing me, she wasn't asking me to be grateful for the blindness. She was asking me to recognize the gifts, that the support that I had within the blindness. So, for example, the supportive parents, the older brother who didn't make accommodations, or I mean, no, I said that backwards, did make accommodations, didn't lower expectations because of the blindness. So fast forward to the chaplaincy, I was incredibly grateful for all those patient experiences, because again, it taught me to view myself as the whole person, not so hyper-focused on the blindness. So one specific example that sticks out and was so clear to me is, one day I had a patient request that wanted to see a chaplain. And I went in to this specific unit, and I walked in, and I walked into the room. The patient took a look at my guide dog and me and said, "You're blind?" Like completely with this question in her voice. Mm-hmm. And my thought was, well, I think so. I mean, I was this morning when I woke up. And so I said, yes. And she said, okay, then I'll share honestly with you how I'm doing. And what I learned after my visit with her is, she would not open up to the doctors, the nurses, the social workers, anyone who walked in the room. When I walked in the room and she didn't feel like she was being judged on her physical appearance, she was willing to open up and honestly share how she was feeling emotionally with her physical diagnosis. Mm-hmm. So that one conversation led to multiple visits where she could move forward in her healing emotionally, because she was willing to open up and share and be honest with me as the chaplain. So that was an incredible situation of gratitude because it taught me, yes, this is hard. Yes, this is stressful. Yes, there are moments of being overwhelmed. And also there are deep, deep moments that I am incredibly grateful for that other people who are sighted don't have that opportunity.
One of the things that I talk about and think about as life goes on is, and we've talked about all the accommodations and the things that you needed to get in order to be able to function. What we, and most everyone takes for granted, is it's the same for sighted people. You know,
Right.
we invented the electric
100%.
light bulb for sighted people. We invented windows so they can look out.
Yes.
We invent so many things and we provide them so that sighted people can function.
Right.
And that's why I say, in large part, blindness isn't the problem, because the reality is we can make accommodations. We can create and do create alternatives to what people who can see
Right.
use. And that's important for, I think, everyone to learn. So,
Yes.
So what did you do after your year of chaplaincy?
So after my year of chaplaincy, after that incredible experience of just offering the patient care, I completed the part of the, well, after I started in the master's program, but then after that also completed my ordination in the Methodist Church. So I was appointed, I went through the process, the ordination process, and then I was appointed to a local church back here in South Carolina. And again, with my focus on chaplaincy, my focus on patient care, I was appointed to that church because what they needed most in the pastor, the leader, was that emphasis on the pastoral care, the mind, body, spirit connection. So as I became pastor, I was able to continue that role of what I was doing in the chaplaincy, of using both my professional experience as well as my personal experience of providing spiritual care to the members. So that was an incredible way. And again, that gratitude, I was so grateful that I could use those gifts of pastoral care, of chaplaincy, to benefit others, to be a strength to others. Right. Again, is that whole person that we are.
Now, are you still doing that today, or what are you doing now?
So okay. I'm still there part-time.
Okay. And when you're not there, what are you doing?
I'm doing professional speaking, and it's all centered around my passion for that. Again, came when I was at Princeton, when I was doing the focus on chaplaincy. I became so passionate about the speaking, to share my personal experience of the change I experienced, and also to empower others as they experience change. So not to be stuck in that negativity like we talked about in those middle school, high school days, but rather that everybody, regardless of the situation, could experience change, acknowledge it, and move forward with that balance of gratitude. So that's my deep passion for, and the reason for the speaking is to share that grit and gratitude as we all experience change.
So what made you decide to begin to do public speaking, though? What was the sort of the moment or the inspiration that brought that about?
Just that deep desire to share the resource that I'd experienced. So as I received so much support from family and community, as I had received that support of learning how to use the grit in the change, and then as I received the support of how to use the gratitude in the change, The reason for this speaking and what made me so passionate was to be able to empower others to also use this resource. So I didn't just want to say, okay, it worked for me, and so I'll just keep this to myself, but rather to use that as a source of empowerment and say, hey, this has been really, really difficult. And here's how I can use this difficulty to empower others, to support others.
So how's that working for you?
Great. I love supporting others as they go through that change. Because again, it comes back to the blindness is not all we focus on. It's not all we think about. It's not all we talk about. It's not all we do. But being able to use that as a strength to empower others. So just speaking to different organizations as they're going through change and working with them, speaking on that, how can they specifically apply the grit and the gratitude? What does that look like practically in their organization, in their situation? So I love it because it takes the most difficult thing that I've been through and turns it around to empower others.
What do you think about the concept that so many people talk about regarding public speaking, that, oh, I couldn't be a public speaker. I don't want to be up in front of people. I'm afraid of it. And it's one of the top fears that we constantly hear people in society have, that is being a public speaker. What do you think about that?
So two perspectives have helped me to process that thought, because you're right. People literally say that to me every day. How do you do that? I could never do that. Yeah. I hear that every single day, all day. And what I've learned is when I focus on, yes, maybe it is a large audience, but focusing on, I'm speaking to each person individually. And I'm not just speaking to them, but I'm speaking to serve them, to help, again, that empowerment, to provide empowerment. So what I think about that is I don't focus on, oh my gosh, what are they going to think of me? I'm scared up here. Rather to have that mindset of, I'm here to share my life experiences so that they can be served and empowered to continue forward. So just shifting the mindset from fear to support, fear to strength. That's how I view that concept of, I could never do that, or that's my worst fear.
So a lot of people would say it takes a lot of courage to do what you do. How do you define courageous, or being courageous?
Great question. That's a work in progress. So far, what I've learned over the years, and again, this is a process, there wasn't just one moment where I said, okay, now I'm courageous and I'm courageous forever, or this is the moment that made me courageous. But how I understand it and how I process it now is, for me, in my experience, courage is accepting and acknowledging the reality and then choosing to move forward with the grit, choosing to move forward with the gratitude. So holding both intention, both can be true. Both, I can acknowledge, okay, this is difficult. And also, I can also believe and know I can have the grit moment by moment by moment. I can have the gratitude moment by moment by moment. So for me, courage is holding both intention. The reality, and what I mean by both, is the reality of the blindness and reality of the frustration of people's thoughts, judgments, all that. You can't do this. How can you do that without sight? Holding all of that at the same time as I have the support I need to move forward. So for me, courage looks like acknowledging when I'm overwhelmed and then choosing at that same time to move forward with the support that I have.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well,
again, that's what I mean by it's not just like one moment that, oh yeah, I'm going to be courageous now and forever. There's certainly moments where I don't feel courageous, and that's
yeah,
okay. That's part of courage, just
yeah.
acknowledging that frustration and also choosing to move forward. So it's doing both at the same time.
We live in a world today where there is a lot of change going on,
Yes.
and some for the good, some not for the good, and all sorts of things. Actually, I was reading
Yes.
an article this morning about Michael Connelly, the mystery writer, who for 4 decades has written mystery books. He's lived in Los Angeles. He had a wonderful house, and everything changed when the fires hit, and he
Okay.
lost his
Yeah.
home and all that. But he continues to move forward. But what advice would you give? What kinds of things do you say to people who are undergoing change or experiencing change?
I'm so glad you asked that because I didn't mention this in the grit, so much of the grit that I experienced. So the advice I would give, or practically what I do with someone, that just what I did right before we connected, was being that grit for someone going through change. So in that, for example, in that speaking, when I'm speaking to a group about the change they're experiencing, acknowledging for them to acknowledge, let me be your grit. You might be overwhelmed. You might be incredibly fearful and overwhelmed by the future, by the task in front of you. So let me be the example of grit to show you that there is support, there is courage, there is that foundation to be able to move forward. So that's my first advice, is just allowing others to be your grit when you don't feel like you had it. Because again, in those high school days and even now days when I don't feel like I have any grit, any courage, and yet I lean on the courage, the strength, the grit of those around me. So once they acknowledge and allow me to be their grit and their support through that change, then allowing them to slowly have that grit for themselves. And again, reminding them it's not an instant process. It's not an instant do these 3 steps and you'll have grit forever. But it's a continual process of grit and gratitude that leads us through the change, through the difficulty.
Have you used the technique that person that you talked about earlier in high school used when she asked you to write down every day 3 things that you were grateful for?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And the funny part of that, what that makes me laugh, is a lot of people have the exact same reaction I had. When
Mm-hmm.
I present it to them, they immediately say, I'm not going to do that. That's no, why would I do that? They immediately think that is a horrible piece of advice,
Mm-hmm.
and how can I recommend? And I just, I don't say, oh, well, just try it anyway. I just say, well, okay, just try it and see, just prove me wrong. And just like my experience, they try it, and then a week or two later, it's like, oh, that actually worked. I didn't think that would. So yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because that happens a lot. People say that doesn't make sense. Why are you telling me to be grateful in the midst of this overwhelming situation? So yes, great perspective. That happens all the time.
Well, we've been doing this now for about an hour, but before we wrap up, do you have any other advice that you want to pass on for people who are dealing with change or fearing change in their lives right now?
The advice would be, take it step by step, moment by moment, rather than trying to navigate through the whole change at one time. That's overwhelming. And that's not the process that is most healing. So to trust in yourself, to trust that grit around you, and then just like you were saying, and ask me, it doesn't seem like it'll work, but try the gratitude. Try that 3 things every day you're grateful for, and just see what happens as you navigate through the change.
Yeah. And it really does work, which is the point.
Yes, which is the point. Right.
Is,
Right. We don't think it's going to, but it totally
but
does.
it does. Well,
Yes.
Laura, I want to thank you for being with us. This has been absolutely wonderful and fun. And I hope that people who listen got and who watch it got a lot out of it. And you provided a lot of good expectation setting for people. And you've certainly lived a full life. We didn't mention, we got to, before we sign off, you're also an author.
Yes. So I wrote Harnessing Courage, again, just like the reason I speak. I was so passionate about taking the grit and the gratitude that I used that was such a source of empowerment for me. I wanted to tell my story and tell it through the perspective of grit and gratitude so that other people could also use it as a resource. So the book tells my story of becoming blind and adapting and moving forward, but through the complete expected perspective of the grit and the gratitude, how I didn't believe the gratitude would work, how I struggled with thinking, oh, the gratitude is ridiculous. That's never going to be a source of empowerment. Yet it was. So the purpose of the book, my hope, my goal for the book is that people can read it and take away those resources as they face their own change, their own challenges.
And when did you write it?
So I wrote it it was published in 2016.
Okay.
So that definitely was my goal and passion. And that just writing the book was incredibly healing, was like a great source of strength.
Cool. Well, I hope people will get it. Do you do any coaching today or?
Yes. So I do coaching as well as the speaking. So the one-on-one coaching as people are experiencing difficult or just navigating through change. I do the one-on-one coaching as well as the speaking.
Which is certainly a good thing the chaplaincy taught you.
Yes, 100%.
Well, thank you again for being here. And I want to thank all of you for being with us today, wherever you are. We would appreciate it. I would definitely appreciate it if when you can, you go to wherever you're listening to or watching the podcast and give us a 5-star review. We absolutely value your reviews. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this, and I'm sure Laura would. So you're welcome to email me at Michael, MICHAELHI, at accessibe, ACCESSIBE.com. Love to hear your thoughts. And also, of course, as I said, we'd love your 5-star reviews wherever you're listening. Also, if any of you, Laura, including you, have any thoughts of others who we ought to have on this podcast, we're always looking for more guests, and we really would appreciate it if you'd let anyone know who might be a good guest in your mind, that they can reach out or email me and I'll reach out. But we really would appreciate that. But again, Laura, I just want to thank you one more time for being here and for taking all this time with us today.
Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for hosting this podcast. It's incredibly powerful, and we all need to be reminded.